The stars looked different through the viewing window of the human ship. Jake Morrison stood there, his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the massive space station grew larger ahead of them. This was it. First contact with alien life. The moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. "We're being hailed again," Lisa Grant said from her console. She was the ship's chief science officer, and her fingers moved quickly over the controls. "They're sending us docking instructions." Jake nodded and walked over to stand beside her. "Any problems?" "No, they seem friendly enough, just very formal." Lisa looked up at him with a slight smile. "And they keep calling us the small ones in their transmissions." That made Jake frown a little. The aliens they were about to meet called themselves the Galactic Coalition. From what humanity had learned in the past 3 weeks since first radio contact, the coalition was made up of 12 different species. They had been traveling through space for thousands of years. They had technology that humanity could barely understand, and apparently, they thought humans were small. The docking process took another hour. When it was finally complete, Jake led his team of 5 humans through the airlock and onto the alien station. The corridor beyond was enormous. The ceiling stretched at least 20 feet high, and the hallway was wide enough to drive a truck through. "They built this for species bigger than us," Lisa whispered. She was right. When they reached the main greeting area, Jake understood why. The aliens waiting for them were huge. The one in the front stood at least 8 feet tall. Its body looked like a giant insect, with 4 arms and a head that reminded Jake of a praying mantis. Its armor was dark blue and covered in symbols that probably meant rank or status. "Welcome, humans," the alien said. Its voice came through a translator device that made it sound mechanical. "I am Commander Vexthar of the Coalition Security Forces. We are pleased to meet your species." Jake stepped forward and offered his hand, palm up, the way the Coalition had instructed during their communications. "Thank you, Commander. I'm Jake Morrison, representing Earth and humanity." Vexthar touched Jake's hand briefly with one of its smaller arms. The gesture seemed awkward, like the alien was being careful not to break something fragile. "You are smaller than we expected," Vexthar said, "but this is not unusual. Many species in the galaxy are of various sizes." Behind Vexthar, other aliens watched with curious eyes. One looked like a large lizard standing on 2 legs. Another seemed to be made of rocks that somehow moved. A third had too many eyes to count and floated in the air without any visible support. Over the next few days, the humans went through what the Coalition called evaluation procedures. They had to take physical tests, mental tests, and compatibility tests. The aliens wanted to know everything about human biology, culture, and capabilities. Jake found himself in a testing room with Lisa and 2 other humans. They had to lift weights, run on tracks, and perform various physical tasks. Vexthar watched from behind a transparent wall, making notes on a device Jake couldn't identify. "Your strength is average," Vexthar announced after the tests were complete. "Your speed is moderate. However, your endurance readings are unusual. You can maintain activity for longer periods than most species we have recorded." "Is that good?" Lisa asked. Vexthar made a sound that the translator didn't interpret. "It is interesting. But overall, your species falls into what we classify as Class D. You are not suited for security work or combat positions. Your bodies are too fragile. You lack natural weapons or armor. You would require protection in dangerous situations." Jake felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his voice calm. "I see. And what does Class D mean for our membership in the Coalition?" "You would be welcomed as a protected species," another alien said, stepping forward. This one was the lizard-like creature, wearing robes that marked it as some kind of official. "I am Ambassador Krell. We would be honored to offer humanity a place in our community. We would provide military defense and technological support. In return, You would contribute your knowledge and resources. Lisa leaned close to Jake. They think we need babysitters, she whispered. Jake heard her but kept his attention on the aliens. We appreciate the offer, Ambassador. We'd like some time to review the terms and discuss them with our government. Of course, Krell said, bowing slightly. Take all the time you need. We understand this is a significant decision. That evening, the human team gathered in their assigned quarters on the station. The rooms were too large for them, with furniture that didn't quite fit human proportions, but it was comfortable enough. They're treating us like children, one of the team members said, frustration clear in his voice. Or like pets, another added. Jake sat on the edge of a too-tall chair, thinking. Lisa was at the room's computer, reading through Coalition databases they'd been given access to. Jake, look at this, Lisa said suddenly. According to their historical records, the Coalition hasn't had a major war in over 800 years. The last significant conflict was something they call the border disputes, and even that was mostly political maneuvering with a few small battles. 800 years of peace? Jake said, surprised. More or less. They have pirates and criminals, sure, but no actual warfare. No species versus species conflicts. Nothing that would require real military action. Lisa looked up from the screen. They've forgotten how to fight. Jake absorbed this information. It explained a lot. The Coalition had been at peace for so long that they'd lost touch with what real conflict meant. They looked at humans and saw small, fragile beings without natural weapons. They didn't understand that humans had been fighting wars since the beginning of their history. What do we do? Lisa asked. Jake stood up and walked to the window. Beyond the glass, he could see dozens of alien ships moving around the station. Each one represented a species that thought humanity was weak, that thought humans needed protection. We accept their offer, Jake said finally. We join the Coalition as a Class D species. We smile and we learn everything we can about them. And then? Lisa asked. Then we wait, Jake said. Sooner or later, they'll see what humans are really capable of. When that happens, they're going to be very surprised. He didn't know how right he was. 3 weeks had passed since humanity joined the Coalition. Jake Morrison now spent his days as a liaison, attending meetings and helping both sides understand each other better. It was boring work, mostly paperwork and translation issues, but it was necessary. Today was different. Jake was on a Coalition transport ship heading to one of the outer colonies. The ship carried diplomats from 6 different species, including 2 humans. The other human was Danny Wright, a security specialist who had served with Jake in Earth's military years ago. This is a milk run, Danny said, leaning back in his seat. He was a lean man with sharp eyes that never stopped moving, always watching everything around him. Nothing ever happens on these diplomatic trips. Don't say that, Jake replied with a small smile. You'll jinx it. Danny laughed, but the sound cut off suddenly. An alarm began blaring throughout the ship. The lights flickered and changed to emergency red. The ship shuddered violently, throwing passengers against their restraints. Commander Vexthar's voice came over the speakers, tight with something that might have been panic. We are under attack. Pirates have disabled our engines. All passengers remain seated. Jake and Danny looked at each other. In that single glance, they communicated years of training and experience. Both men unbuckled their restraints and stood up. Wait, Vexthar said, appearing in the doorway to their cabin. The tall alien's body language showed confusion. You must stay seated. This is a dangerous situation. Exactly, Jake said, already moving toward the door. Where's your security team? They are at their posts, awaiting orders from Coalition Central Command. Awaiting orders? Danny said, his voice sharp. Someone's boarding your ship and they're waiting for permission to stop them? Vexithar seemed even more confused. That is the protocol. We must assess the situation and receive proper authorization before taking action. Violence is a last resort that requires... An explosion somewhere in the ship cut off the alien's words. The lights went out completely for 3 seconds before emergency power kicked in. Danny didn't wait any longer. He pushed past Vexthar and ran down the corridor. Jake followed with the confused alien commander behind them. They found the security station quickly. 6 Coalition guards stood there, all different species, all holding weapons but not moving. They stared at their monitors with what looked like fear. 8 hostiles have boarded the ship, one of the guards said. His voice shook. They are heavily armed. Central Command has not yet authorized engagement. We are to wait for... Give me a weapon, Danny said. The guard looked at Vexthar, who seemed frozen in uncertainty. On the monitors, they could see the pirates moving through the ship. They were large creatures, bigger than humans, with thick armor and heavy weapons. Now! Danny's voice cracked like a whip. Something in his tone made one of the guards move. She handed Danny a plasma rifle. He checked it with practiced efficiency, then looked at Jake. I'll go left, you go right, Danny said calmly. Flank them. Drive them to the cargo bay. It's a choke point. Jake nodded. He took another rifle from a stunned guard. How many civilians are on board? 47, Vexthar managed to say. Get them all into the reinforced dining area. Lock it down, Jake ordered. When nobody moved, he raised his voice just slightly. Move, now! The Coalition guards jumped into action, finally breaking through their paralysis. Vexthar began coordinating the civilian evacuation while Jake and Danny split up. Jake moved through the corridors with his rifle ready. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. This was what he had trained for, what humanity had trained for over thousands of years of warfare. He found the first pirate in a side hallway. The alien was huge, at least 7 feet tall, with armor covering most of its body. It was tearing apart a door panel, trying to get into the medical bay. Jake didn't hesitate. He fired twice. The first shot hit the pirate's exposed knee joint. The creature howled and turned. The second shot hit its weapon arm. The pirate dropped its gun and stumbled backward. Stay down, Jake said coldly, keeping his rifle aimed. The pirate stared at him in shock. Here was this small human, this creature the Coalition had classified as weak and fragile, who had just taken him down in seconds. Somewhere else in the ship, Jake heard weapon fire. That would be Danny. He moved forward, checking corners and doorways like he was back in training. Another pirate appeared at the end of the corridor. This one was ready, its weapon already raised. Jake dove behind a support column as plasma bolts burned the air where he had been standing. He counted to 3, then rolled out and fired. His shot hit the pirate's helmet, cracking the visor. The alien fell back, disoriented. On his earpiece, Danny's voice came through. 2 down on my end, driving 3 more toward the cargo bay like we planned. Copy that, Jake replied. I've got 2 disabled here, moving to intercept. Vexthar's voice came through, shaky but trying to stay calm. All civilians are secure. Jake Morrison, Danny Wright, what are you doing? We have never seen anyone move and fight like this. Later, Jake said shortly, keep those civilians locked down. He reached the cargo bay entrance, just as Danny appeared from the other side. Between them, 3 pirates were backing into the large open space, clearly trying to regroup. They hadn't expected resistance. They definitely hadn't expected humans. They're all yours, Jake said to Danny. Danny nodded and stepped into the cargo bay. The last thing Jake heard before the door sealed was Danny's calm voice saying, "Drop your weapons and you won't get hurt." Then the pirates made their choice. Weapon fire erupted inside the cargo bay. Jake stayed at the door, monitoring the security feed on his wrist device. What he saw would have been impossible to believe if he wasn't watching it happen. Danny moved like water, flowing between cover points, using the cargo containers as shields and ambush spots. The pirates were bigger, stronger, and had better armor. But Danny was faster, smarter, and completely unafraid. He used every trick Jake knew he had learned in Earth's military. Feints, misdirection, psychological pressure. One pirate fell, then another. The third tried to run, but Danny was already there, cutting off the escape. The fight lasted less than 4 minutes. When the cargo bay door opened again, Danny stood there, breathing hard but uninjured. Behind him, 3 pirates lay unconscious on the floor. Vexthar arrived with the other security guards. They all stared at the scene in complete silence. Finally, the alien commander spoke, and his voice was very different from before. "What manner of species are you?" Danny looked at Jake and shrugged. "We're human," he said simply. "This is what we do." The fight wasn't over. Even as Jake and Danny secured the 3 pirates in the cargo bay, new alerts flashed across the ship's systems. More pirates were coming. The first group had been a boarding party. Now the main force was arriving. "How many?" Jake demanded, looking at the security monitors. Vexthar's hands shook as he worked the controls. 12 more signatures. They're cutting through the hull in 3 different locations. Danny checked his weapon's power cell. It was running low. "Do you have any more rifles?" "We have 6 in the armory," one of the Coalition guards said. She was a young alien named Zara, barely out of training by Coalition standards. "But Central Command still hasn't authorized lethal force protocol. We could be disciplined for—" "People are going to die if we don't act," Danny interrupted. He looked at Vexthar. "You can blame me after. Right now, I need those weapons distributed to your guards." Vexthar hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Something had changed in the alien commander's eyes. He had seen what humans could do, and his certainty about Coalition protocols was crumbling. The ship shuddered again. Somewhere, hull plating was being torn away. Jake pulled up a map of the ship on the nearest screen. "They're trying to split us up," he said, pointing to the breach locations. "One group here in the stern, one near the bridge, and one heading for the civilian shelter." "We can't defend 3 locations," Zara said, her voice tight with fear. "There are only 8 of us guards, plus you 2 humans." "We don't defend all 3, Danny said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We let them come to us." He looked at Jake. "But someone needs to slow down that group heading for the civilians." "I'll go," Lisa Grant said, appearing in the doorway. The science officer held a medical kit in one hand. "I can seal that corridor with emergency bulkheads, trap them between sections." "Lisa, you're not trained for combat," Jake started to say. "No, but I'm trained to use a ship's emergency systems. Let me do this." Her face was set with determination. Jake wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. He nodded. "Be careful." Lisa ran off toward the bridge control station. Danny was already organizing the Coalition guards, placing them in defensive positions. His instructions were quick and clear. The guards looked uncertain, but they followed his orders. They had no better options. "What about me?" Vexthar asked. "Coordinate with Central Command," Jake said. "We need backup ships here as fast as possible, and tell them to authorize whatever force is necessary or we're all dead." Vexthar's antenna twitched, which Jake had learned meant the alien was stressed. But the commander moved to the communications console and began sending urgent messages. The first group of pirates breached near the engineering section. 6 heavily armed aliens poured through the opening. The Coalition guards opened fire, but their shots were uncertain, untrained. Only 2 hits landed, and neither did much damage. "Fall back to position 2, Danny ordered over the comm system. "Let them advance into the cross corridor." The guards retreated, and the pirates followed, confident and aggressive. They didn't know they were walking into a trap. When they reached the intersection, Danny and 3 guards hit them from the side, while Jake and 2 others fired from above, using a maintenance catwalk. It was a massacre, not because the humans were cruel, but because they were efficient. Every shot had a purpose. Every movement was calculated. Within 30 seconds, 5 pirates were down. The 6th tried to flee but ran straight into Zara, who had finally overcome her fear enough to fire. Her shot took him in the leg, and he fell. "Secure them," Danny ordered. "Check for weapons and communication devices." The second breach happened near the bridge. 4 pirates tried to force their way through, but Lisa had done her job well. Emergency bulkheads slammed down, trapping the pirates in a corridor with no exits. They were effectively in a metal box. "I've got them locked in," Lisa reported. "But the bulkheads won't hold forever. They're cutting through." "Let them waste their energy," Jake said. "We'll deal with them after." The real problem was the third group, 12 pirates, all heading for the cargo bay where Danny had stored the first 3 prisoners. The cargo bay had another access point to the civilian shelter. If the pirates got through, innocent people would die. "I'm going," Danny said, checking his rifle one more time. "That's 12 against 1, Jake said. "Even for you, that's suicide." Danny looked at his friend and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. "Remember training? When they taught us that 1 person in the right position is worth 10 in the wrong one? Danny, I'll be in the right position. Trust me." Danny turned to Vexathar. "Broadcast the cargo bay security feed to every screen on this ship. Everyone needs to see this." Before anyone could stop him, Danny was gone, running toward the cargo bay. Jake felt his stomach clench with worry, but he forced himself to focus. He still had 4 pirates trapped in the corridor near the bridge. He gathered 2 guards and moved to handle them. On every screen throughout the ship, the cargo bay security feed flickered to life. Vexthar had done as Danny requested. Coalition crew members, guards, and even the secured civilians could all see what was about to happen. Danny entered the cargo bay just as the 12 pirates broke through the far door. They saw him immediately. One small human standing alone in the middle of the large space, holding a rifle that was already showing a low power warning. The pirates laughed. Their leader, a massive creature with 4 arms and thick scales, pointed at Danny. "Look, brothers! The Coalition sends children to fight us now!" Danny didn't respond. He just moved. His first shot took out the lead pirate's forward left knee. The creature fell, howling. His second shot destroyed a light panel, plunging part of the cargo bay into darkness. What happened next would be talked about in Coalition space for years to come. Danny used the environment like it was an extension of his body. He disappeared into the shadows between cargo containers. When pirates searched for him, he appeared behind them, taking them down with precise shots or brutal hand-to-hand combat. He used their size against them. The pirates were big and strong, but the cargo bay hadn't been designed for combat. They couldn't move between the containers as easily as Danny could. They were too confident in their strength. Danny hit the 4th pirate with a metal bar across the back of the head. The creature stumbled, and Danny was already gone, firing from a new position. Pirates shot wildly, hitting containers and walls. Danny's shots never missed. Throughout the ship, aliens watched in stunned silence. They saw Danny take a hit to his shoulder. The plasma bolt burned through his uniform and left a serious wound. Any Coalition guard would have stopped, crying out in pain, waiting for medical help. Danny barely slowed down. He rolled behind cover, used an emergency medical pack to seal the wound in 3 seconds, and was moving again. "How?" Zara whispered, watching the screen near Jake. "How is he still fighting?" "Because he has to," Jake said quietly. "That's what humans do. We don't stop until the job is done." 5 pirates down, then 7, then 9. The remaining 3 tried to escape, but Danny had herded them, using psychology as much as weapons. He had made them afraid. These creatures who had bullied their way through Coalition space for years were now terrified of one wounded human. The last pirate dropped his weapon and fell to his knees, making sounds that the translator identified as begging. Danny stood there, breathing hard, covered in sweat and blood, some his and some theirs. His rifle was completely empty. He had a cut over one eye, and his shoulder wound was bleeding through the medical seal. But he was standing. They were not. On every screen throughout the ship, aliens watched this small, fragile human who had taken down 12 armed pirates essentially alone. Vexthar's voice came over the speakers, and for the first time since Jake had met him, the alien commander's tone held something like awe. All pirate forces have been neutralized. The ship is secure. Danny looked up at the nearest camera and gave a small nod. Then his knees buckled, and he sat down hard, finally letting the pain and exhaustion catch up with him. Jake was already running. The Coalition Council chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from all 12 member species. Today it was packed. Every seat was filled, and more aliens stood along the walls. They had all come to hear about the humans. Jake stood in the center of the chamber, feeling very small. Beside him stood a woman he had met only yesterday. Admiral Helen Hayes was one of Earth's top military officers. She had arrived on a fast ship as soon as word of the pirate attack had reached Earth Command. "Let us begin," said the council speaker, an ancient alien whose species name Jake couldn't pronounce. The incident aboard Transport Vessel 7 has raised many questions about the human species. Questions we need answered. Jake had expected anger, maybe even fear. Instead, what he heard in the alien's voice was curiosity and something else. Respect, maybe. 3 humans defeated 24 armed pirates, another council member said. This one was from the same species as Vexthar. The security footage has been analyzed by our best military experts. What they saw should have been impossible for a Class D species. Perhaps our classification was wrong, the speaker said. Ambassador Morrison, we have reviewed your people's information databases. What we found was disturbing. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. May I speak, Council? The speaker gestured agreement. Hayes walked to the center of the chamber, and a holographic display activated above her. Images began to appear. Ancient human warriors with swords and shields, soldiers from Earth's world wars, modern military forces. Humanity has been at war for our entire recorded history, Hayes said, her voice calm and clear. We have fought wars over land, resources, religion, politics, and sometimes for reasons we ourselves don't fully understand. We have developed thousands of different fighting styles, strategies, and weapons. The images continued. Battles, armies, weapons through the ages. The council members watched in silence. We evolved as hunters, Hayes continued. Not ambush predators who kill with one strike, but persistence hunters. We chased our prey for hours, sometimes days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. We learned to work in groups, to plan, to adapt. She paused, letting that sink in. When we developed agriculture and civilization, we didn't stop fighting. We just got better at it. We studied war like you study science. We wrote books about strategy and tactics. We built entire schools devoted to teaching people how to fight and lead armies. Ambassador Krell spoke up from his seat. But you claimed to be peaceful. Your first messages to us spoke of cooperation and friendship. We are peaceful, Jake said, speaking for the first time. But peace and the ability to fight are not opposites. We chose peace because we know the cost of war. We've seen it. We've lived through it. Another council member, from a species that looked like living crystal, asked the question they were all thinking. How have you survived? If you have been fighting wars for so long, why didn't you destroy yourselves? We almost did, Hayes admitted. Several times. But we also learned to control our violence. We developed rules for warfare. We created treaties and organizations devoted to peace. We learned that being able to fight doesn't mean you should fight. Vexthar stood up from his seat. Since the pirate attack, the commander had changed. His earlier confidence about coalition superiority was gone, replaced by a more humble attitude. I watched Danny Wright fight, Vexthar said. I saw him take injuries that should have incapacitated him, yet he continued. I saw him use tactics and strategies that no coalition security force has trained for in centuries. I saw him win against impossible odds. The alien looked around at the other council members. We need to understand this, not to fear it, but to learn from it. You want to militarize the coalition? Another member asked, sounding shocked. I want us to be prepared, Vexthar replied. We have had peace for 800 years. That is wonderful. But we achieved that peace by being strong enough that no one dared attack us. Over time, we forgot how to be strong. The pirates knew this. That's why they've become bolder in recent years. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some council members agreed with Vexthar. Others argued that the coalition's peaceful nature was what made them superior to violent species. The speaker raised one appendage, and silence fell. Admiral Hayes, you said humans have rules for warfare. Explain this. Hayes nodded. We have something we call the laws of war. They define what is acceptable in combat and what is not. We protect civilians. We treat prisoners humanely. We don't torture or commit unnecessary cruelty. We fight to win, but we try to do it with honor. That seems contradictory, Krell said. How can violence have honor? Because violence without rules becomes slaughter, Jake answered. We learned that lesson the hard way. Yes, we know how to fight. Yes, we're good at it. But we also know when to stop, when to show mercy, when to choose talking over fighting. Lisa Grant's voice came through a communication device. She was still on the transport ship, helping with repairs. If I may add something? I've been studying coalition history. You haven't had major wars, but you've had problems with pirates and criminals for decades. The numbers have been increasing. You have species on your borders that don't respect your peaceful nature. You need the ability to defend yourselves, not just the desire for peace. More discussion filled the chamber. Jake watched the council members argue back and forth. Some were afraid of what humanity represented. Others were fascinated. A few looked like they were having their entire worldview challenged. Finally, the speaker spoke again. We must vote on this matter. The question before us is simple. Do we reclassify humanity from Class D to a higher classification, and do we invite them to help train our security forces in what they call combat readiness? The vote took over an hour. Council members consulted with their governments and advisors. Jake and Hayes waited, not speaking, barely breathing. When the result came, it was closer than Jake had hoped, but still positive. 8 species voted yes, 3 voted no, 1 abstained. Humanity will be reclassified as Class A, eligible for all coalition positions including military and security, the speaker announced. Furthermore, we invite Earth to send military advisors to help develop a new coalition defense doctrine. Hayes bowed slightly. We accept, with one condition. The chamber went quiet. You have conditions? Krell asked, sounding amused. Yes. Any training we provide must be voluntary. We won't force your people to become warriors. We'll teach those who want to learn, and we'll make sure they understand not just how to fight, but why we fight, and when fighting is the right choice. The speaker considered this, then nodded. Agreed, this is acceptable. As the meeting ended and the council members began to leave, Vexthar approached Jake. I owe you an apology, the alien said. I judged your species by your size and appearance. I thought you were weak. You weren't entirely wrong, Jake said with a slight smile. We are fragile compared to many species here. Our bodies break easily. We don't have natural armor or weapons, but we learn to overcome those weaknesses. We learn to use our minds as our greatest weapon. Vexithar's antenna twitched thoughtfully. There is something I must ask. When Danny Wright continued fighting despite his injuries, despite the pain he must have felt, what drove him to keep going? Jake thought about his friend, now recovering in the medical bay. Duty, responsibility, the knowledge that if he stopped, people would die. Humans have a saying. We do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Sometimes being human means doing what needs to be done, no matter the cost to ourselves. I think, Vexithar said slowly, we have much to learn from your species. And we have much to learn from you, Jake replied. That's what makes this partnership valuable. You can teach us about peace and cooperation across vast differences. We can teach you about strength and resilience. Together, maybe we can be better than either of us alone. Vexthar made a gesture that Hayes had identified as agreement. I hope you are right, Jake Morrison. For all our sakes, I hope you are right. 6 months had changed everything. The Coalition training facility on Station Harmony 7 now looked very different from before. Where there had been administrative offices and research labs, there were now combat simulators and training grounds. Where Coalition guards had once stood confused and uncertain, they now moved with purpose and confidence. Danny Wright stood in the center of a training arena, watching a class of 20 Coalition security officers practice close-quarters combat techniques. His shoulder had healed well, though it still ached when the station's weather control systems changed the pressure. He ignored the pain. Pain was just information, his old instructor used to say. Again, Danny called out. And remember, you're not trying to overpower your opponent. You're using their strength against them. Smaller doesn't mean weaker if you know what you're doing. One of his students was Zara, the young guard who had been on the transport ship during the pirate attack. She had changed the most. The fear that had paralyzed her during the fight was gone, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was sparring with a much larger alien, using leverage and timing instead of brute force. Better, Danny said as Zara successfully threw her opponent. But watch your left side. You're leaving it exposed. Yes, instructor, Zara replied, helping her partner up. Danny smiled. That was another change. Coalition guards used to be uncomfortable with physical contact. Now they understood that training meant getting close, falling down, and helping each other back up. Across the station, Lisa Grant was working with a group of Coalition scientists. They were developing new defense systems, combining human tactical thinking with Coalition technology. The results were impressive. Shield generators that could adapt to different attack patterns, sensor arrays that could predict enemy movements, weapons that were powerful but designed to disable rather than kill. The key is balance, Lisa explained to her team. Humans learned this the hard way. You need weapons strong enough to stop threats, but you also need control systems to prevent accidents or misuse. One of the scientists, a floating being named Eris, asked a question. But how do we know when to use these weapons? How do we decide when force is necessary? That's the hardest part, Lisa admitted. And honestly, we're still learning ourselves. Every situation is different. But humans developed something we call rules of engagement, guidelines for when and how to use force. We can adapt those for Coalition use. In the command center, Jake worked with Vexthar and Admiral Hayes. They were reviewing reports from Coalition border stations. The news wasn't good. Another colony went silent yesterday, Vexthar said, his antenna twitching with stress. That makes 5 in the past month. All in the same sector? Hayes asked, studying the star map. Yes, the outer rim, near uncharted space. Vexthar highlighted the locations. Search teams found the colonies completely destroyed. No survivors. No indication of what attacked them. Jake frowned at the pattern. That's not pirates. Pirates steal. They don't destroy entire colonies. We know, Vexthar said. The Council is calling an emergency session. Something new is coming. Something we haven't faced before. An alarm suddenly blared through the station. All 3 of them looked up at the same moment. Hayes was the first to the communication console. This is Admiral Hayes. Report. The voice that replied was shaking. Admiral, we're receiving a distress call from Colony Station 9. They say they're under attack by unknown hostiles. Multiple contacts. Large-scale assault. Put them through, Jake ordered. The voice that came through was barely recognizable through the static and background noise. This is Station 9. We need immediate help. They're everywhere. We've never seen anything like this. They're not taking prisoners. They're just destroying everything. How many? Vexthar demanded. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They're like a swarm. They keep coming and coming and... The transmission cut off with a burst of static. The command center was silent for 3 seconds. Then everyone moved at once. Hayes started calling for coalition fleet mobilization. Vexithar contacted the council. Jake pulled up tactical displays, analyzing what little information they had. Danny arrived minutes later, still in his training uniform. What's happening? We don't know yet, Jake said. But it's big. Bigger than pirates. Within an hour, the emergency council session convened. This time it wasn't in the formal chamber, but in a crisis command room. Every council member appeared via hologram, their faces showing various levels of fear and uncertainty. We're calling them the Devourers, one council member reported, based on what our surviving scouts have seen. They're a hive mind species, traveling in massive ships. They consume everything in their path. Resources, technology, living beings. They leave nothing behind. Images appeared on the screens. Blurry footage from a scout ship showed massive, organic-looking vessels. Thousands of smaller craft swarming around them like insects. Wherever they went, planets were stripped bare. How many? The speaker asked, though his voice suggested he didn't really want to know the answer. Initial estimates suggest over 50,000 individual craft in the main swarm, and that's just what we can see. There may be more behind them. Silence fell over the command room. 50,000 ships. The coalition had never faced anything on that scale. We need to evacuate the outer colonies, Krell said. Pull everyone back to the core systems. And then what? Vexthar asked. If we run now, we're just delaying the inevitable. Eventually they'll reach the core systems too. We fight, Danny said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him, the human instructor who had taught them that fighting was sometimes necessary. We fight, Danny repeated, louder this time. We use everything we've learned over the past 6 months. We use human tactical knowledge combined with coalition technology. We use strategy, preparation, and the will to defend what's ours. Against 50,000 ships, one council member said. That's suicide. Maybe, Jake said, stepping forward beside his friend. Or maybe it's survival. Humanity has faced impossible odds before. Sometimes we lost, sometimes we won, but we always fought. We never just gave up. Admiral Hayes accessed a data file and sent it to everyone's displays. Earth is sending 12 warships with human crews. They'll arrive in 3 days. We're also sending 300 military advisors with combat experience. It's not much, but it's what we can spare while still defending our own system. In the meantime, Lisa added from her position at a science console, we need to learn everything we can about these Devourers, their tactics, their weaknesses, their technology. Information is a weapon too. The speaker looked around at the gathered council members. 6 months ago, we would have been helpless in the face of this threat. We had forgotten how to fight, how to defend ourselves. The humans showed us that peace requires strength to protect it. Now we must put that lesson into practice. The question is, Krell said, will 6 months of training be enough? Vexithar stood straight, his earlier doubt replaced by determination. It will have to be. We have no choice but to make it enough. He looked at Jake, Danny, and Lisa. The humans have given us the tools and knowledge. Now we must prove we can use them. Over the next 48 hours, the coalition mobilized like never before. Every available ship was prepared for combat. Civilian volunteers were trained in basic defense. Scientists worked around the clock developing new weapons and shields. The humans moved between groups, teaching, advising, encouraging. Danny gathered the Coalition security forces he had trained, nearly 500 aliens from different species, all wearing the new Coalition Defense Force uniforms. "You've learned how to fight," Danny told them, "but more important, you've learned why we fight, not for glory or revenge or conquest. We fight to protect those who can't protect themselves. We fight to preserve the peace we've built. We fight because someone must, and we're the ones who can." He paused, looking at their faces. "You're going to be scared. That's okay. Fear is natural. What matters is what you do despite that fear. You move forward. You trust your training. You watch out for the person next to you. And you never give up." Zara raised her weapon in salute. "We are ready, instructor." The others followed, 500 voices speaking as one. "We are ready." In the command center, Jake watched the approaching Devourer fleet on the long-range sensors. They would arrive in less than a day. The Coalition fleet was assembling, human warships arriving to join them. Admiral Hayes stood beside him. "Think we have a chance?" Jake thought about Danny's words to the trainees, about Vexthar's transformation from dismissive officer to determined commander, about Zara and hundreds like her, who had overcome their fear to stand and fight. 6 months ago, the Coalition would have been destroyed without a fight, Jake said. They would have waited for orders that never came, followed protocols that didn't work, and died without understanding how to save themselves. Now? He smiled slightly. Now they know how to fight. They know how to adapt. They know that being peaceful doesn't mean being weak. "That didn't answer my question," Hayes said. "I know," Jake replied, "but it's the best answer I have. We gave them the tools. They found the courage. Tomorrow, we'll see if that's enough." The sensors continued their patient tracking of the approaching swarm. The Coalition fleet finished its preparations. Humans and aliens worked side by side, no longer divided by old classifications or misconceptions. Tomorrow they would face the Devourers. Tomorrow they would learn if 6 months could overcome 800 years of forgotten lessons. Tomorrow they would fight.